under the impression that's exactly what's happening, and then if this were to come along and rip that away, I worry about the unintended consequence of that. That's probably more of a comment than anything, but maybe a follow-up question would be, I know you say counseling is available, but what alternatives, I mean, maybe with bankruptcy proceedings, but that requires legal help. Where do folks who really are trying to resolve this issue, they cannot afford an attorney, like if this were in place and there was no debt settlement practice in North Carolina, even though they may try to get some counseling, like what are they to do? Like where are they to go? I'm just trying to understand that, to make sure that they have options.
Representative Howard.
Thank you, John.
Yes, of course.
The file that's in my office is about 8 inches thick, built up over the years, and we have no true evidence that there are success stories. I'm sure that all of the lobby industry that's over here can provide that for you, but in the last 6 years since we've been working on this bill, we don't see that there's evidence. To the contrary, we have the military sending us letters asking that we please do something. We have AARP. We have lots of letters, and if I should have gotten more right now, but I don't have them. I will have updated letters shortly, but there's something wrong here. And instead of having people to stand and praise this relationship, they're not. They're asking us to try to help them. And there is a way that these companies could act legally with the credit counseling, and there's a $40 fee, but they don't choose to do that. They choose to continue operating as they have. And when you have military that's deployed and you have a wife with maybe 3 little children, as we had in a previous hearing, telling us that they are going to lose their home, and that they were told to do one thing and quit making the payments, though they were current. They were encouraged to stop making the payments and let these people negotiate for them. It doesn't work. I mean, it's not working. But if there's a way to fix this and keep these people in business, I'm all for it. But it concerns me that it must be a big money-making industry, because they hire 16 to 18 lobbyists every time this bill shows its face. And that's high dollars.
Does staff want to add anything to that? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I probably just have 2 more questions, and
Yes, sir.
if you indulge me. So, I will admit, I don't know anything about this practice. I guess I'm fortunate that I have not had to deal with this per se. Being 120 vote last time, do we know why the Senate? I mean, it seems like it would cruise through the Senate too, right? I mean, 120 to 0. I mean, that doesn't happen very often. I mean, what is it, do you think, that's been the slowdown in the Senate? Or do we, maybe we don't know?
Some people back here on this wall that could probably tell you better than I can.
Okay.
I don't duck hunt.
I'm just curious.
And, I'm going to tell you the truth.
Okay.
We have some good friends that's hunting buddies with the Rules Chairman over in the Senate.
Oh, okay.
And so his allegiance for duck hunting raises taking care of what's right to do.
Okay.
I've said it.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I was not. Okay. Thank you for sharing. I was just really curious. Last question, Mr. Chairman, then I'll be quiet. Is there, is there on mean, you've talked a lot about these lobbyists. I mean, is there truly an effort between the Justice and all these groups that are willing to try to get some guardrails in place rather than wiping this out for fear of some of these folks that may have entered into these contracts? I just have deep concern about people that innocently entered into these contracts that are really trying to get their debt paid off, and they've got a program. And so I'm trying to make sure we're not forgetting about them. So is there is there an effort going on trying with the industry to maybe try to get some guardrails in place, and so this bill takes a different form somehow, or is this what it's going to be? I'm just trying to understand that.
We are trying,
Okay.
and for the last 4 years, Senator Newton, who is not a duck hunter, by the way, has been trying to get to a world of compromise with this. We will continue to try to do that.
Very good. Yeah, I do not duck hunt either, Representative Howard, just so you know. And that's all I had. I really appreciate all those answers from staff and Representative
Representative
Howard.
Bradford,
Thank
I
you.
would note the effective date on the bill would be July 1, 2023, and apply to offenses committed on or after that date.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Potts, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is there an exit strategy if we've got, I'm told, between 60 and 70,000 people who are using this service, some who are far into the process, maybe it's working, maybe it isn't, but we just going to tell them on July 2023 that you can't do this anymore. It's like getting a building permit and building the house and you're getting half done and somebody says, well, we don't want any more houses in this neighborhood. You had to stop here. Is there some way to protect the people who are in it, Representative Howard, now who may or may not be getting good quality service? Thank you.
Representative Howard, you're recognized.
Larry, as I said, we, Representative Potts, as I said, we have tried for the last 4 years to get people at the table, and we will continue to do that. And if we need to extend the date further, I am more than willing to do that.
Representative Jones, you're recognized.
Thank you. Maybe I just didn't understand. Did you say it's already illegal to engage in this practice, this debt settlement, even without this bill being passed? Is that correct?
You want staff to answer that? Can staff respond to that, please?
Right. This bill is just taking the criminal chapter and moving it into Chapter 75. Now, it does modernize those definitions a lot when it does that, but currently is a misdemeanor, Class 2 misdemeanor, to engage in debt adjusting or debt settlement in North Carolina.
Okay, that's what I thought you said. May I have a follow-up?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so then I take it the problem has been, and I'm asking, not accusing, a failure of some agency like the AG's office to enforce it, or DA's offices, as opposed to lack of authority to do it.
Can staff answer, please?
That is one argument that can be made. And there have been a lot of meetings and discussions over these many years about this bill. What the agencies would say is that, it's a very low level thing. It's just a misdemeanor. And then it's not a high priority. And then the current existing statute is quite antiquated and has a lot of words in there, and it makes you have to prove a lot of elements to potentially get that misdemeanor conviction. And so I think it's a combination of how much resources, arguably how much resources you're going to put into it, and then what your chance of success is. And of course, the industry can read the statute too, and so they have divided up their operations among lots of companies, so that it's harder to find one particular actor that's completing the transaction. So the transaction is divided at least among 2 actors. And so that makes prosecution more complex because you don't have this clear situation where one individual or company did it all, because currently they use at least two companies to do it.
Follow up?
Yes, thank you. And so I take it this bill will help cure that problem, and they can be better gotten at if we pass this.
Staff, can you respond, please?
That's the goal, is that by modernizing the language and streamlining it, there's less to prove, but also it gets away from the sole reliance on a criminal prosecution for the prohibition on debt adjusting and debt settlement. This bill maintains the exact same criminal offense at the same offense level, but by putting it in Chapter 75, now it's a civil penalty too. And so, unfair and deceptive trade practices carry treble damages, potential for class action. And so I could imagine situations where, the liability here could be real on a civil side if you were committing, you wouldn't just have to worry about a misdemeanor situation. You'd have to worry about being hit by a large civil lawsuit.
Thank you.
Yes. Are there any other questions or comments by the committee? Seeing none, I have two people that have signed up to speak from the public, which I will allow. Denise Dunkel, and if you'll go to where the mic is, please, and let us know your name and the organization you represent, and you'll have up to 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Representative Howard. My name is Denise Dunkel, and I'm the CEO of the American Fair Credit Council. We are the trade association for the debt resolution or debt settlement industry, and I appear today to oppose House Bill 481. For years, the AFCC's member companies have worked alongside North Carolina consumers who are struggling to pay their unsecured debts by helping negotiate less than full balance settlements with their creditors. Our members settle hundreds of millions of dollars of unsecured debts for tens of thousands of North Carolinians every single year. Our industry has been tightly regulated at the federal level since October of 2010, when the Federal Trade Commission passed rules implementing a regulatory regime for debt resolution providers. Included among the significant consumer protections enacted by the FTC a decade ago is a prohibition of debt resolution companies from billing, let alone collecting, any portion of their compensation unless and until 1, the provider negotiates a settlement, 2, the consumer accepts the settlement, and 3, the consumer subsequently ratifies his or her acceptance of that settlement by making a payment to the consumer's creditor. The consumer may choose to reject the settlement, in which case the provider cannot bill or collect any portion of their compensation. And in order to make this process functional, debt resolution service providers are prohibited from any and all contact with consumer funds. This is a federal prohibition. At all times, the consumer is the sole owner of the money that they have put aside to settle their debts and in the debt resolution program. The AFCC has long been a strong champion of robust consumer-centric legislation that would be both protective of consumers while enabling the industry to continue to provide services. Unfortunately, however, HB 481 would put into place a flat prohibition on debt resolution, making it impossible for legitimate debt resolution companies to operate. We appreciate the opportunity to meet with the sponsor of this, we appreciated the opportunity, and I met again with her this morning, the sponsor of this legislation, but we met with her for the first time earlier this year to regulated industry out of business in North Carolina. Because this legislation would deny tens of thousands of financially challenged North Carolina consumers an important tool when dealing with unmanageable levels of consumer debt at precisely the time many will most need it, we again respectfully oppose HB 481. Debt resolution is not only a critical service allowing consumers afflicted with unmanageable consumer debt, but a service that has been available to North Carolina consumers without controversy for more than a decade. Debt resolution serves financially challenged consumers, saves financially challenged consumers tens of millions of dollars each year. And now more than ever, consumers will need every available option to deal with their debt burdens. And now more than ever, debt resolution is likely to be their only option to bankruptcy for debt-burdened consumers. HB 481 will hurt those consumers who need or will need debt resolution the most, and we would respectfully request your no vote on this legislation, and thank you for the extra time.
Thank you for your comments. Adams Volto. If you state your name and any organization you may represent, you'd have up to 3 minutes to speak, sir. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to share comments. My name is Adam Savalto. I'm with the North Carolina Justice Center. A CNBC article published last month highlighted the most recent quarterly report from TransUnion, revealing that the U.S. credit card debt has reached an all-time high of $930 billion at the end of 2022. And indeed, consumer debt generally has hit a historic peak, up about $1.3 trillion from a year ago. Inflationary pressures over the past year have pushed households to rely more heavily on credit card debt for necessities. These factors present a perilous landscape for consumers, leaving them more susceptible to predatory tactics of debt settlement companies. As mentioned, these companies use questionable tactics to convince consumers in distress that they can substantially reduce their debt. They charge fees as high as 25%. And in the end, few debts are settled, consumers are sued by numerous creditors, face multiple judgments, and their credit scores are wrecked. I'll also share that other entities that have weighed in on this matter include the North Carolina State Bar Council, who voted unanimously to support this bill in 2020. It is likely that they'll vote to support it again. They meet later on this month. I would like to express appreciation to the bill sponsors for their leadership on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Those are all the people who had signed up to comment, but I'll just ask, is there anyone else present that would like to speak for or against the proposed legislation? Seeing none, back to the committee. Are there any other further discussion, questions, or comments before I take a motion? Representative Bradford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it possible to ask any of these speakers questions since they're
sorry?
Is it possible to ask those speakers questions since they're representing?
Who would you like to ask a question to?
Maybe the young lady in the green to start.
Ms. Dunkel, will you yield for some questions from staff? Would you please go back up to the podium? Representative Bradford, is this for a single question or a series of questions?
I think two.
Are you recognized for a series
Thank
of
you.
questions?
My
Please be
first-
cognizant of our
Yeah,
time.
my first question is, I'm sort of scratching my head. I asked the question if this practice was, this type of industry was legal or illegal in North Carolina, and then Representative Jones asked that same question, and I'm kind of hearing like, well, this is illegal. So how do you reconcile that? Is this, do you believe what you're doing to be legal or illegal in the state of North Carolina as an industry? I'm just trying to understand from your perspective.
I
Just
understand.
your name and identify your agency, please.
Sorry, Denise Dunkel. I'm with the American Fair Credit Council. Representative, I do believe it to be illegal, and I actually have an email from the Attorney General's office here in North Carolina from 2010 that welcomed us into the state to do business, that welcomed our industry into the state to do business.
Okay, and just have one follow-up, please.
Yes, sir.
So, well, thank you for that. I'm thoroughly confused, I don't mind admitting, but I think maybe you are too, Representative Jones. But nonetheless, my next question is, how many other states allow this practice? Because I don't know. I'm just curious.
Almost every state allows this practice. There are, I believe, maybe 3 states that do not allow that, have a prohibition, or not a prohibition, that don't allow debt settlement. But almost every single state does.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, and I have like maybe 1 or 2 questions for the other speaker, if that's possible, just because.
Let me ask this. Is there anybody else on the committee that would like to ask this lady a question? Representative Jones, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ma'am, you heard one of the other speakers say that your industry, you may not use this word, but I paraphrase it, was predatory.
I did hear that, yes.
Okay. So what, if any, response would you have to that?
I don't believe that. And actually, I have a number of consumer letters from North Carolinians that this industry is helping them get out of debt and letting them get on with their lives. We have standards. First of all, we follow the rules and regulations of the Federal Trade Commission. of the state. And then our association, for our member companies, we have standards that go up and above the Federal Trade Commission standards, including standards on marketing, so that we are policing our companies so that they are not out there doing unfair and deceptive marketing.
Follow up, please.
Follow up. Yes, sir, you're recognized.
Is it, another statement was made that sometimes your fees are up to 25%. Is that correct?
Each company charges a different percentage on fee, and they charge it a different way. But typically, 25% would be a little bit higher than what is normally a fee. And remember, these are not upfront fees. We are a pay-for-performance industry, so there's not a fee charged until the settlement is negotiated, the consumer accepts that settlement, and the consumer can also say that that settlement is not right for them, and the consumer makes their first payment. The consumer can walk away from this program at any time with no penalty, no repercussions. And their money is in a separate account because we don't pay that money to their creditors. They pay the money to the creditors. They're in charge of that account at all times, and they can take that money out at all times as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Representative Bradford, did you want to ask a question of Adams Volta?
The gentleman from the Justice Center, if that's okay.
Ms. Volta, will you yield to some questions? If you'd
I
please
think
go
I
up,
have two.
back up to the podium.
I think I just have two questions.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
You're
Yes,
recognized,
yeah.
Representative Bradford.
Thank you very, very much. So is it the Justice Center's position that that you would like to do away with this industry completely, or is it your position that you're trying to put guardrails around the industry? I'm just trying to get clarity on that.
Before you answer, please state your name again for the record and who you represent.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Again, Adam Savalta with the North Carolina Justice Center.
Thank you.
I mean, to answer your question, sir, this practice can be done on a not-for-profit basis, and we are certainly in favor of continuing that. What is not okay, and what has been shown to be not okay, is when this practice is done for profit. And that's the position that the Justice Center takes, that, frankly, we don't want to see that. Again, the predatory practices are documented, and I would steer you to a consent order, a recent consent order between the North Carolina State Bar and a North Carolina attorney over bilking North Carolinians out of millions of dollars. And I'm glad to make that available for the committee after this.
Just one follow-up. So I posed the question earlier, if this industry were no longer, like what answer would you provide someone that's in a position where they truly cannot afford to seek legal remedies through bankruptcy? Perhaps they're unaware that there's nonprofits out there to help them. Where do they go if they in earnest want to work this out if this industry wasn't there? Like, I'm just trying to understand options. So I just would love to hear your perspective on that.
I will just
Yes, sir.
I will just say that indeed more readily, yes, of course. There are other options other than adding debt to debt. That's how I would express that.
Okay, I'm sorry. Maybe three questions. One more, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay.
All right, one more
and I
last
promise
chance.
that's it. And I know we got to move this thing on.
One more last
Yeah,
question.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we talked a lot about 50, 60, 70,000 people have used these services or continue to use these services. There's contracts in place. How do you reconcile that if this thing were to pass, that those agreements that have been put in place in good faith by our citizens who are really trying to resolve this and feel like they're on a pathway, how do you reconcile that now may be in jeopardy? Like what say you?
Yes, sir.
To the extent that those contracts are enforceable, I can't comment. That's beyond my scope.
Representative Jones, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you. So your organization's position is against 481 or for it?
No, sir. We are
You're
for
for it. Okay.
House Bill
That's
481.
what I thought. So.
Follow up?
Yes, may I have a follow-up? Would this, in effect, though, basically, to use Mr. Bradford's words, I think he said, wipe out the industry of the debt settlement industry in its entirety,
Are you able to respond to that?
if you want.
As mentioned before, the industry operates in other places before other than North Carolina.
Okay,
Our position,
I got
we
you.
don't want it to.
I got you. Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions,
No, sir.
comments? Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. In closing, Representative Stain, you're a primary sponsor on this. Would you like to make any comments, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to ask you if I could do that. So I appreciate the recognition and I appreciate the committee's indulgence in the debate. I think it's been interesting. As Representative Howard pointed out, this is something that we've passed. I think it was 120. I mean, I know it's overwhelming. For all the talk that's happened in committee today, this is a good bill. It's a bipartisan bill. She's worked very hard on this bill. We know that it probably may likely, as she indicated, go to the Senate and not receive a welcome reception. However, that should not prevent us from voting it out of this committee, getting it to the House floor, and sending it over. So I ask that you support the bill and appreciate my co-sponsors that are on the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Howard, would you like to say anything else in closing? Okay. Hear nothing else, do I hear a motion? Representative Stain, you're recognized for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move for a favorable, I'm not sure if this is PCS or not, walked in a little late, but
No,
move
it's
for
a
a favorable
straight-
on the bill.
Straight bill.
Okay.
With referral to rules.
With a referral to rules, sir.
That is the motion before us. Any discussion before we vote? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. All opposed, please say no. The ayes have it, and we'll receive a favorable report. Thank you, Representative Howard. The last bill that we're going to hear is House Bill 146. However, the Representative Rydell had to leave. Therefore, he asked for the bill to be displaced, which it will be. So no further business to come before the committee. We are adjourned, and thank you.